Hi, welcome to our home in this Christmas season. And I have my granddaughter, my oldest grandchild, Joy Airholtz, with me here today.
Hello.
And it's a cold day. I know some of you watch from Mexico and other places like that. And right now it's below zero. Always zero, I said. And so it's a very cold day, and we have what's something called a wind chill, and that brings it down even lower. We're going to read a Christmas story for you today, as we're approaching that day, only a few weeks away now. And this story is taken from Christmas in My Heart, Volume 15, that was edited by Joseph Wheeler, and it's entitled The Christmas Pageant. Now, this is different from the one that's like the movie. That was Robinson that wrote that, and also we had that at our church too. By Peter Linnea wrote it, read it, and that was also by Robinson. But this one was written by Michael Lindval, and begins this way: For 46 years, the church pageant ran like clockwork, everything tied to a script that left no room for error. Each was a near perfect production. But finally came a Christmas where the unexpected occurred. The results could have been foreseen. Well, some of them. The Christmas pageant is over. It was in the end wonderful, and now that it is past, my blood pressure, and this is written from the perspective of the pastor, my blood pressure, and in fact, the church's communal blood pressure, have dropped about 20 points. We got through it again without schism and with no divorces. None of the kids got grounded this year, but it was close.
The whole saga of the Christmas pageant really began precisely 47 Christmases ago, when Elvina Johnson first directed our children's Christmas pageant. Something that she continued to do through 10 pastors, 9 U.S. presidents, 3 wars, and who knows how many Christian education committees for the next 46 years. But not this year, and that's the story. International alliances came and went, wars were fought and peace made, ministers were called and then called away, but Elvina Johnson directing the children's Christmas pageant was like a great rock in a turbulent sea.
Elvina is Mrs. Johnson. Although there is no Mr. Johnson, there was a Mr. Johnson for only 3.5 weeks. That was 49 years ago. A few days shy of their month's wedding anniversary, Mr. Johnson, nobody remembers his first name, left. Although Elvina never puts it that way, she prefers to say he just ran off to Minneapolis, with the accent on Minneapolis, as if it were the notorious place Mr. Johnson's morally feeble nature had lured him away from wife and home, rather than having anything to do with Elvina.
Nobody here ever talks about why he left. They all know, just as they know why rain falls down and grass grows up. One might call Elvina stubborn, but that word isn't quite enough. Elvina is intractable, unchangeable, unmovable. This, everyone assumes, Mr. Johnson easily discovered in the space of 3.5 weeks. When folks around here get to put out with Elvina, who is disguised as a sweet 70-year-old lady, they refer to her, under their breath of course, as the Iron Butterfly.
But Elvina does what she says, always, exactly. forever. 47 years ago, somebody asked her to do the Christmas pageant. She said yes. And they didn't say, would you do the Christmas pageant this year? So Alvina, who is a literalist in all things, assumed that they meant forever. And she is a woman of her word. Alvina's pageants always had precisely 9 characters: 1 Mary, 1 Joseph, 3 wise men, 2 shepherds, 1 angel, and 1 narrator.
The script was simply the Christmas story out of the King James Bible, which meant that 2 6-year-old shepherds had to learn to say, "Let us now go even unto Bethlehem, and see this thing which is come to pass, which the Lord hath made known unto us." Auditions for the 9 parts were held the last Saturday afternoon in October for 46 years. Rehearsals for the 9 lucky winners were held in the next 5 Sunday afternoons. Alvina's goal was nothing less than perfection in Christmas pageantry. Perfect lines, perfect pacing, blocking, enunciation, perfect everything, which is not easily achieved with little children, even 9 carefully selected ones. Critics said that Alvina would have much preferred working with 9 midget actors, if she could have gotten away with it.
Time and again, people tried to get Alvina to open things up so that every kid who wanted to have a part could have one. Alvina, they would say, Scripture says that there was a heavenly host, not just one lonely angel. Alvina, why not a few more shepherds? Then everybody could be in the pageant. Or, Alvina, if there were shepherds, there had to be sheep, right? We'll make some cute little woolly sheep outfits for 3 or 4-year-olds. Nope, she'd answered. Too many youngsters, too many problems.
Early in the fall, however, something happened that deflected the inertia of nearly half a century of always doing it the way it had always been done. The Christian Education Committee included the 3 young mothers of last year's rejected Mary, Joseph, and wise man number 2. And these young mothers pulled off what they call in Central America a coup d'etat. At their September meeting, they passed the following motion: Resolved, all children who wish to be in the Christmas pageant may do so. Parts will be found.
Alvina heard about it that night, and she was in my office the next morning at 9 o'clock sharp. She began by asking me if I thought the decorations on the tree in the church parlor were appropriate. I had not noticed them, I said. Well, she said, she informed me that they were walnut shells decorated to look like little mice, with tiny stocking caps on their heads. What, she asked, do mice have to do with the birth of our Lord?
Now, I knew this wasn't the problem. I too had heard about the committee meeting the night before. "What's the matter, Alvina?" I asked. "Young mothers," she said. She spat these 2 words out as though young mothers were an illicit occupation. "Young mothers," she continued, "who have no knowledge or expertise in the proper direction of a Christmas pageant. Young mothers are behind those walnut shell mice, and they are behind the destruction of the Christmas pageant." She then resigned as director and said, if these young mothers know so much, let them try to do it. She was angry, maybe even angry enough to quit the church, but she didn't. I suspect that she wanted to hang around at least long enough to see these young mothers fall flat on their faces.
The pageant was last week. The young mothers didn't fall flat on their faces, but the pageant was, well, different from what everybody had come to expect over the last 46 years. It seemed as though there were a cast of thousands, even though the actual number was 50 or so, which was every kid in the church up through the 8th grade. At this age, they would sooner die than get dressed up in their father's bathrobe and pretend to be a biblical character.
There must have been a dozen shepherds and 10 angels, a veritable heavenly host. There were the sheep, a couple dozen 3, 4, and 5-year-olds who had on woolly fake sheepskin vests with woolly hoods and their dad's black socks pulled up on their arms and legs. The pageant was a lot of things, but smooth it wasn't. And one of the chief problems was these very sheep. Now, in suburban Christmas pageants, I imagine sheep are well behaved and fairly quiet, but suburban kids have seldom seen real sheep. The only sheep most suburban kids have ever seen are on the front of a Sunday church bulletin covers. Peaceful, grazing sheep who just stand there and look cute and cuddly.
Half of the kids here live on farms. They've seen real sheep, many of them, and they know that sheep don't just stand there. They know that sheep don't often follow directions, and they know that sheep are dumb, and they know that all sheep want to do is eat.
So when the young mothers casually instructed the 2 dozen sheep to act like sheep, they really should have known better. Some of the sheep started to do a remarkable imitation of grazing behind the communion table. Some wandered over by the choir to graze, and others went down to the center aisle. Some wandered over, they wandered all over. Some of them had donuts they found in the church parlor to make their grazing look even more realistic. When one of the shepherds tried to herd them a bit with his shepherd's crook, some of the sheep spooked and started to scatter just like real sheep do. Everybody knows that's how sheep act. It was, in fact, a remarkable imitation of sheep behavior, even though a bit out of ordinary for a Christmas pageant.
Now Elvina was watching all of this from the last pew in the sanctuary. I could just see her from where I was sitting, and as the sheep spooked and scattered with much imitation bleating, Elvina looked down to hide a smirk. Young mothers, I'm sure she was thinking, if they know so much, let's see what they do. Let them try to direct a Christmas pageant.
The real climax of the impersonation came, however, at the point of high drama when Mary and Joseph enter. Mary clutching a baby doll in a blue blanket. This year's Mary, whose name was actually Mary, was taking her role with an intense and pious seriousness. She looked into the face of the doll in her arms with eyes that really seemed to see the infant Christ. Joseph was another story. He had gotten the part because he had been rejected from the Christmas pageant participation by Elvina Johnson more times than any other kid in church. With good reason, some may say.
Anyway, Mary and Joseph were to walk on, as the narrator read, and Joseph also went up from Galilee out of the city of Nazareth into Judea, and unto the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, to be taxed with Mary, his espoused wife, being great with child. At least this is what the narrator had read at the rehearsal. But a few hours before the performance, one of the young mothers had observed that none of the children could much understand King James English, and so they voted, in their ongoing mood of revolutionary fervor, to switch to the Good News translation of the Bible for the performance. What kid knows what great with child means? They asked.
The Good News translation is much more direct and to the point. So as Mary and Joseph entered, the narrator read, Joseph went to register with Mary, who was promised in marriage to him. She was pregnant. As that last word echoed from the narrator through the PA system into the full church, our little Joseph, hearing it, frozen in his tracks, gave Mary an incredulous look, peered out at the congregation, and said, "Pregnant? What do you mean, pregnant?"
This, of course, brought down the house. My wife, wiping tears from her eyes, leaned over to me and said, "You know, that may well be just what Joseph said." Elvina was now wearing a look that simply broadcast, "I told you so." But as the pageant wound into its closing moments and the church lights were dimmed for the singing of Silent Night, a couple of magical, I would allow miraculous things happened. The sheep, when they had finished their part, bleated their way down the aisle to sit in the last couple of pews to watch the end of the pageant. Elvina was in the last pew, and she suddenly found herself surrounded by a little herd of 3, 4, 5-year-old sheep in sheep outfits.
It was late, the church was warm, and the sheep were drowsy. I glanced over to Elvina as the wise men were exiting. The piano began softly playing the melody of Silent Night, and we could see what had been happening outside for the last hour. The first real snow of winter was falling. Big flat flakes floated down and covered everything with a white uniform perfection. As we, little kids and grown-ups, saw it, there was a spontaneous and corporate ah.
We sang Silent Night, Holy Night, all is calm, all is bright. It was very softly that we sang, and all the sheep were quiet, even the ones who were awake, and everybody looked at the snow coming down. It was as if flakes of grace were falling free out of heaven, blessing the muddy earth with purity, a white covering the dirt and the shoddiness with perfection. When the carol was finished, no one stirred for a long time. It wasn't planned, but we all just sat there and we watched.
It seemed like an eternity, but it was maybe 2 minutes. Minnie McDowell broke the spell. She's hard of hearing and always talks too loud. She meant to whisper to her husband, but everyone heard. "Perfect," she said, "just perfect."
And so it was. Not perfect in the way Alvina's pageants tried to make things perfect, but perfect in the way that God makes things perfect. God accepts our fumbling attempts at performance, at love, at fairness, and then covers them with His grace. The moment even touched the iron butterfly. A young mother said that Elvina mentioned to her that if they needed any more sheep outfits for next year, that she could perhaps find time to make a few. The end. God bless you and Merry Christmas to you all.
Hi. So we're doing things different today. We're doing Enjoy after that wonderful Christmas story.
No,
Steve
we
is
just had the
cold.
story, and
He's
I
hugging the
told Joyce she
fireplace.
did wonderfully. That's the
Yes.
first time she ever read a story, and let me tell you, if you haven't done that, it's different. It's a little different thing to read a story like that. I mean,
I don't. In all these years when Steve would read that annual Christmas story at church, I've never read it. Sarah always did.
But it's just, I was telling Joy, you can't really ad lib.
Right.
I mean, but if you do ad lib, then you need to be able to flow back in.
Uh-huh.
There were a few things that I added, maybe you too, but that's hopefully you got something out of that story.
It was
It's
good.
a meaningful story. I
So
found.
this time I was behind the camera and I had to muffle my spontaneous responses. Do you
But
notice how quiet I was? I didn't interrupt at
But
all.
Mrs. Johnson came around, you might say. I mean, and that's a good example for us. You know, like I said, she could have left the church even. I think that was part of the story, but she didn't.
Right.
She stayed. In fact, not only that, she said, I'll help make some next year, some sheep
Yes.
uniform or sheep,
Yes.
or whatever you call it.
Yes.
So anyway, Joyce has some enjoy
Yeah.
things.
Just have an entry here in my enjoy journal. I'm enjoying being home these past 2 days, Monday and Tuesday, totally at home. Oh, I
Joyce has
loved
been
it.
extremely busy, as has, Sarah and Joy too. I mean,
Elsie,
because they've had the Red Umbrella open quite a
Andrew,
bit.
yes.
And tomorrow, Joy has her final exam for college on Friday. And then she'll graduate from Northwest Tech School. So that'll be fun.
That's awesome.
You're gonna do well.
Yes.
I know you will.
Yes. So I wrote, I am enjoying the peace, the quiet here in our home. I'm enjoying the touches of Christmas decor in the different rooms and the trees. And I put, I'm enjoying the snow. I wrote this yesterday, that it has lightly been falling outdoors for how many days? Just
Several
very
days.
light
Quite a few
snow.
days piled up, and we need that here before it gets real cold like
Right.
it did now, because
Right.
that protects the sewers and so forth,
Right.
so they don't freeze up.
So it looks and feels like winter here. This is out looking out of our patio windows. We different times we did TouchPoint, we'd be sitting out on the deck or by those tables, and you'd see Galt Lake in the back. So, Steve, what's your comments about Galt Lake right now? You referred to it being cold and a wind chill. Well, what is the official temperature now?
It is. That's why I got my phone here. It's 11 degrees below zero, but the wind chill is 30 below. I mean, that's what it feels like,
Cold.
is 30 below zero, and then there's a cold weather advisory on here.
Oh, it's there?
It says cold weather advisory in effect until 10 a.m. tomorrow. What? Very cold wind chills to 37 below zero.
Whoa.
Impacts the dangerously cold wind chills as low as we mentioned can cause frostbite in less than 10 minutes.
Wow.
We know that some of you watch from Mexico. I know Melee does, and Rodolfo is way down in
Yes.
Morelia. That's way down in Mexico. You probably think, how can we live? Well, we stay in the house a lot.
Yeah.
Actually, one of the coldest I ever was when I was in Mexico, because there we couldn't. The houses weren't heated like we
It was
have in here, because
Christmas
it doesn't
time.
get cold there
Yeah.
like here. But anyway, that's what it says, and that's what it is right now. But it's nice and warm in here.
Yeah.
Nice and cozy.
Yes. Yeah.
And we're by the fire. You see where I'm standing.
Yeah,
right
he's
here.
hugging the fireplace.
That's nice heat coming out of here.
Yes. So anyway, enjoy your day. And again, we say Merry Christmas to you.
and to all a good night.